Hello, Tareck Adeeb community. How is it going? How's it going? Accessible Astrology community as well. Just gonna wait for everyone to get in. So, depending where you are right now, I hope you are having a nice summer. We just got back from a trip at the weekend, and it's been a lot of fun, and I really hope that you are making time, if you are in the Northern Hemisphere, just to kind of, get in the sunshine. And I was looking back because it's funny because, association is such a big part of our phenomenological experience, how we choose to engage in the world, memories. And, astrology is brilliant for that because obviously, we're coming towards the solstice point, very, very soon now. And I've been working with the solstice and equinoxes in some ways before, I suppose it was similar sort of time when I got into astrology, but started to really understand the nature of these cycles, for example, when we look at things like the top of the chart, the bottom of the chart, or the ascendant, the descendant, these are all moments within the chart that bring about a certain degree of, let's say, peak moment. It's like a full moon cycle, when we have a new moon and then it shifts into a full moon. There's a waxing period, a waning period. And all of these cycles, as we start to become more sensitive and start to flow into the nature of this, I call it a spiral, it's what Rudyard talked about. And the more that we can do that, we start to feel certain patterns, of the universe, the cosmos, our connection and our the reason why we're here. And all of that becomes really interesting. And really, astrology has a lot to do with storytelling. That's really what it's all to do with. And it's our personal experience, it's our phenomenological experience, it's our, again, connection to the divine. And all of these labels or ways of interpretation is what makes it meaningful, makes our life meaningful. And, I'm becoming nostalgic, really, when I'm looking back at certain years where we approach the solstice. If you grew up in England and you had an understanding of a place called Glastonbury, it was a very, there's stone circles there, there's a connection to King Arthur there. There's a lot of history there in relation to this kind of, like, you could say, new age hippie or connection to ancient ideas. Obviously there's a lot of folklore, again, story. And it's a bit of a myth, really, is the idea of King Arthur. But still, the energy of the place is when we get into ley lines and all this sorts of stuff. And there's so much information about this now. It gives meaning to a place. So Glastonbury, for example, was a festival that was created. Glastonbury Festival we're talking about now was created just after Woodstock. So again, the whole hippie or the 60s, free love, the boomer generation, the post-war generation, the kids who didn't want war, they wanted love, and this sort of like phenomena was to create festivals. Now, the beauty of it is that when you actually look back at some of those festivals, they were pretty hideous. Like Woodstock apparently got so badly rained on. And if you've ever been to Glastonbury Festival, sometimes it can be heinously muddy, But still, there's something about lots of people getting together and celebrating. And we just were at a festival, like a sort of, it was a festival. It's an event anyway in the mountains at the weekend. And it was just really fun because, again, it's coming out of this post-COVID trauma and people coming together finally, and people coming up together in groups. And we're still in Gemini season right now, so it's a lot of fun to be in that energy of playfulness, of fun. And it's not really exclusive to the Northern Hemisphere. Even in the Southern Hemisphere, if it's starting to go darker now, it will be really dark now, right? Considering, and it'll be winter now, right? Yeah, of course. There still is a lot of fun to be had in this season regardless. Let's say, for example, if you have access to skiing, or even if you're a surfer, the waves are much bigger in the winter. So there's this sort of like feeling of playfulness with the elements, with nature, that seems to come about in these seasons. These peak moments like the solstices, the equinoxes. It's very clear and evident that the seasons are changing, and with all of that, you can get a lot of fun and memories. And I've had some great memories at Glastonbury Festival, for example, and I was looking at the phone and I was looking at the years that I've been there, and looking at the memories again that I had and the moments that I had, you know, which were so prolific. Because again, festivals, and even though they've become so much more corporate now, and you know, people are looking for the quieter ones, or you know, where they have the same energy. But it's ultimately it's about people getting together in an outside environment, and it's about doing whatever you want to do in that outside environment. You know, whether it's drinking, smoking, having a coffee, having a nice meal, and sharing it with people, and having random situations. You know, for example, Glastonbury, you see some amazing music, and not just that, you also see lots of crazy stuff. Like if you have a look at the lineup, it goes on forever because it's just its own culture, it's its own world. And you know, a lot of people probably back in the day go, oh, it's not like it used to be. And yes, I mean, you know, back at some point in the festival, I mean, there was a lot of nudity, you know, there's fire and all that kind of stuff, and all that got taken out through the corporations, you know, and the need for health and safety. And you know, you could probably find it in the very rare places, you know, the private places, but still, you know, that was a big thing. And then like when those travellers and people like that got axed out of it, you know, it wasn't the same for some people. But obviously if you've never been before, you know, and it's all you know, it's a remarkable thing to experience. And it's nice to have those memories, you know. So for me, you know, the weekend, it was like having new memories, you know. We've all been dislocated to a certain extent. We've all been removed from our normal world. I mean, a lot of people are trying to go back to it. But, you know, people don't travel as much, you know, as they used to. Even social situations. I mean, the negative side of COVID was that it encouraged people not to be social, you know, and some people like that. You know, if you're an Aquarius disposition, you know, if you have that sort of introvert kind of personality, then it was great was COVID. I mean, you didn't have to make those social engagements, you know, for business and all that kind of stuff. And that can carry on. Now, to be fair, there's a balance to everything, you know. Having a certain, you know, before COVID, everybody was just, who I knew anyway, my age group, was working, and without any breaks, and flying everywhere, doing all these sorts of things. And then that just got completely turned on its head. So finding the balance, and this is why I bring it up, you know, coming to this solstice point, you know, either the lightest day or the less day, you know, it depends where you are in the world. But still, you know, it's a big marking point, and wow, how fast is this year going? It's crazy, isn't it? It's like, we thought last year went really fast, the years before, despite everything that's going on. And here we are, you know, coming towards the midpoint of the year. So I just have to bring it up because there's always a way, you know, this is why I'm saying it. Like, I can't just fly to Glastonbury Festival, something that, you know, obviously I'd love to do, you know, maybe one day I'll get there. And I was really looking how I can get there to play one day, you know, whether it's poetry or music or DJing. You know, I was really thinking about it yesterday and thinking, right, how am I going to get to go there and bring a few people with me and experience it and enjoy it? I mean, I've known plenty of people who've played there, and there's so many opportunities to play there. So that's what I'm thinking about at the moment, because wouldn't it be lovely to go back? But when I looked at the pictures and I saw those young people, you know, with their bags and everything, going through all of that, I mean, it's hard work. And as you get older, you know, you have less, it's just, you've got less energy, you know, it's just what happens. You know, you can't do as much, obviously, as you used to. So, you know, the thought of going as a punter these days just seems tough, seems very, very challenging. So that's why, you know, you've got to take advantage, you know, while you have your faculties. If you've ever worked in the elderly industry, the elderly care industry, you know, it's a real wake-up call. Like, you know, just to change subject a little bit, but sadly I see so much entitlement, you know. It's not a slight on anyone, but it's just, I see it, you know. I see how lucky people have it, you know, and how amazing opportunities there are, especially in somewhere like America. I mean, yes, it's a big country, and you've got to really go out, get in a car, get in a plane, and go out and get it, and that costs money, you know. So it requires a lot of discipline. You don't have the fortune of, let's say, the healthcare system somewhere like the UK or even the dole or whatever, you know, as much, I don't think, as you do in England or Europe. So you don't have that luxury maybe to enjoy life without the pressure. And there's so much competition also in America, status anxiety and these sorts of things. And it just creates a lot of pressure, really. And even though now, we're in a much far better position if you understand the technology to make the best of this current trend of, opportunity, with the internet and everything. The story I mentioned last week about that guy who created those NFTs and made 15 million in 9 months. It's amazing, to create something out of nothing and just having the balls to kind of call a celebrity and get involved with that is amazing, That's the sort of opportunity you have now. I mean, you never had that before, not to that level. Something out of nothing, That's because of the world of the internet, the world of technology. But like I say, what's sad to me when I see people with this kind of again, it's a sort of a certain sense of entitlement, which is you can see why it exists. I mean, credit and things like that, and you see the world completely irresponsible right now when you're seeing the people at the top, behaving in such irrational ways and selective ways. I mean, you think about it, all that money that's getting printed is going to the top of the food chain. It's not coming down to the masses. Hence why, really a revolution is required, in terms of this top-down structure, which is inevitable that it will flip into a bottom-down structure. I'm not saying that's socialism or communism. I'm saying it's more independent, autonomous, sovereign individuals operating with their authenticity and creating value in it. This is why, recently I've been looking into this idea of DAOs and community engagement and how that's going to evolve with NFTs. And it's going to be a brilliant world, a fantastic world for people who are tapping into their creativity, their artistic sensibility, and getting away from the shackles of the old world, which was empiricist kind of ways of thinking. I've got to work really hard to get this amount of things, when now it could be exponential, it could be quantum. It's a very different world we're living in, and not everybody has adjusted to that way of thinking. And obviously that's why we're here, Tareck Adeeb, that's why Accessible Astrology is here, and that's why we can help, absolutely, get out of those old patterns and shift into this new patterns, this exponential wave, and start thinking differently. Or remembering is the word, really. Remembering who you are, remembering why you're here, getting rid of the shadows or the things, the stuck patterns, the emotions which you're not conscious of, which might be limiting you and putting you into a hive or sheep mentality, or making you feel depressed or that there's no hope. And that is not the way to be living on this planet at all. Even though it's challenging, yes, it's very challenging. But going back to that idea of working with the elderly care, it's something that I did, and, I was really against, really, in a way, when I was younger, because I was more into the idea of rock and roll and having a lot of fun and, being kind of irresponsible and wanting it all, And I was fortunate to be put in a position where I became very responsible in that industry, mainly due to my family. My dad was a doctor, and I started to get involved in, elderly and nursing care, from a business point of view, but also hands-on, getting really in there. And that was one of the greatest experiences, because I was so resistant to doing it at first, because I thought, right, I've got no choice. If I'm going to learn a business, or I'm going to kind of grow and understand the workers and everything, you've got to go hands-on. And that was part of the condition, really. So going hands-on into an industry which pays very little, and it's not valued, really isn't. There's a huge stigma against it as well. And to put yourself in that position where you've got no choice, but you've got to do the best that you can, because your family's name is at stake. It was a very humbling and also incredibly rewarding experience. And I knew that once I did it, I would learn something that I would never have learned before, because it was not something that I was choosing to do, it was something that I was kind of compelled to do. And the only way to get the best out of it was to go all into it. So when things like that happen in life, you sometimes just got to go for it and just relax and surrender into the becoming of it, is what Plato would say. And there's no doubt about it, in terms of understanding the realm of when one passes, the realm of that energy that exists, you know, I mean, it's the same thing if you were a midwife, whatever, and children were coming in, you'd feel and experience that energy of a child coming into the world. And it's the same when you see someone who's about to pass. You know, when you start to understand that and be with it, some of the experiences I had in that realm were, there's no way you could ever learn that, you know, without actually being in it, you know. And the emotion that occurs as well, you know, when a life leaves, when a spirit leaves, and all those sorts of ways of perceiving the end of life, is something that people really should witness and experience, because sadly it's shuttered away. You know, it's put into a box, it's put into a label. It's very hard for children of parents to really understand the psychological differences that are occurring when a parent becomes elderly and needs support. You know, it's like the roles reverse, and that's such a hard thing for many children to really understand, because obviously you've looked at your parents as these significant, like godlike figures, if you look at the psychology of it, and you have so much expectation, and obviously there's so much learning these days about the trauma that comes with that, and how we can move beyond these parental, which, you know, parents are always going to get it wrong. I mean, they're constantly learning, adapting to things. For example, like my friends who've got children, some of their challenges they have right now are very different to what obviously their parents had. They're still the same fundamental parenting things that one must do, but, you know, I mean, for example, like, you know, you've got to be really careful now with Instagram and all these various things, and how dangerous that is, which sadly a lot of parents have had to experience with no idea. And that's the new challenges that we're always facing, you know, with the modern world, you know, as parents. But still, the point I'm trying to make here is that we're going to come into this earth as a child, pure, innocent, you know, with everything to experience, good and bad, sadly, you know, and that's the best thing. I mean, that's why I gave money for charity, for example, for orphans and things like that, because it's one of the hardest things ever, you know, to come into this world without parental support. I mean, it's already hard enough, you know, existing in the world. People are complaining now about not having access to credit. I mean, just think if you lived in a country where there's nothing like that, you know, where you've just got to try and get water. And again, people forget these things. They forget how lucky they have it to live in the first world. You know, getting water, for example, from a tap, even if it's, you know, it could be, you could have a Berkey water filter and have better water. Yes, absolutely. People, companies, corporations, maybe doing things and that shouldn't be in the water. And then at the same time, it's like, well, water should be free. We should all pay for it. We shouldn't have to pay for it. And there's all these things that go on, and there's truth to all of it. But the bottom line is, if you could turn on a tap and get running water, I mean, just imagine if you went to, let's say, a third world country or a war-torn country where there's none of that. And people just don't have that. I'm not saying that's bad, or, you know, you should blame yourself or self-flagellate yourself for not having that information or know-how. But you could definitely find gratitude, you know, for so many things. And again, this entitlement, again, it's a problem, because, again, people don't understand what it's like when you get older. They don't see it. They're not around it. You know, they go visit the grandparents, and obviously see them get older, and that's the way it goes. But again, this is something that I was listening to recently, and I can't remember exactly where I found the source, but it's this thing called The Slight Edge there's a book called The Slight Edge, and it's the same idea. You just do a little bit every day, you know, these micro habits, just do a little bit every day. So, for example, in that book, he says, you know, why doesn't someone eat an apple every day when they know it's good for you, as an example, you know? So why don't you do 10 sit-ups a day? I'll do some yoga every day when you know that you're getting older and you can't bend your back as much. You know, it's things like that. Why don't people do it? And the reality is, it's easy to do, it's easy not to do. You know, it's just simple as that. And for example, when you see someone who's older, vital, full of life, full of, you know, they've got that energy about them still, they're still living, compared to somebody who isn't, you know, suffering and pain, you know. And you just don't know how those micro choices, you know, what happened, you know, to those people as they get older. You just don't know. You know, what decisions, you know, you're so close, every decision, for making a huge movement in that one direction compared to the other direction. It's that sliding doors thing. And the beautiful thing about consciousness and self-awareness, there's always a moment where you can self-correct. You can go into humility, into surrender, and understand, okay, I was going down this path, it's not working for me anymore. I'm going to take one step back and really correct. Anyone could do that at any stage in life, no matter how feeling of humiliation or embarrassment, or suddenly have to change everything, and it's like, oh God, I've got to start again. But you can. That's the thing. And when we get forced into this like structure, or like, oh, we can't go back and that's it now, this is our lot. It's a very, very difficult phase to be in life. I mean, don't get me wrong, we're all bound to certain responsibilities. Like, you should never leave a job without having something else, ideally, to go to. I mean, that's not always the case. Some people are more risk takers. Like, for example, if you're a fire sign, you've probably got more wherewithal to take that chance than somebody who isn't, because generally fire signs are more risk taking. Again, that's a generalisation. I mean, I have to look at the whole chart, to get that understanding of how much of a risk taker you are, for example. But generally speaking, as a rule, if you can find a job before you leave the other job, you're not going to have that same level of pressure, when money's running out. So you can quickly, move. And that's the thing, a lot of people don't do it. They don't have that ability to adapt. And the world that we're living in right now is so full of like the need to adapt, the need to change, the need to, like I say again, we saw it a lot of people moved during the last 3 years from a more fear-based reaction, or like, I need to get out of the city, or because it was kind of hellish in a way if you were just stuck inside and you didn't have that level of ability to be in a home, let's say, without people. And a lot of people thought, well, the city's not as nice now without all of this. And yet at the same time, people who left the city went into the countryside and now going like, oh, I want to go back into the city, So there's a very weird time to be alive, and again, we see changes happen, just like in the Industrial Revolution. We saw people move out of the countryside into the city, and we saw these new technologies, and the people who were probably back in the agricultural revolution, hoeing the land, they couldn't escape that there was technology coming to them as well, tractors or whatever, and things like this, automation was coming their way. They couldn't escape it, even if they could stay in the land. You can't escape it. Like, even in the future, if we have drones, flying saucers, whatever it's going to be, all sorts of stuff coming, all over the place, you won't be able to escape it. You won't be able to escape it. Even if you're living in a farm and you look up in the sky and you see flying saucers or whatever it is, go into space or whatever it may be, or you see drones dropping off this and that, even then you wouldn't be able to escape it. So how do we adapt to it? How do we profit from it? And again, this is why it's so important to be aware of the beginnings and endings in life. When a child comes into the world, not everybody has children, to be able to sort of like be around that, that vulnerability of a child, is such an innocent thing to see, if you've never seen it before. It's so fragile and yet so deep, the level of the soul. It's one of the most beautiful ways to see a soul to me, when you see a child at such a young age, just literally just been born, as 1 or 2 or 3 week age. It's just the pure light, of the soul. To me anyway, that's how I see it. And at the end of life, the blessing that you can have is to be cared for at the end of life. And again, there's so much stigma attached to the medical industry, the business of it all. And, there's something to be said for that. We're escaped communities. We've escaped where the elders live with their families. And again, the elders don't want to be a burden to their children. So this disconnect occurs. And what do? Oh, well, you got to put the elders somewhere where they're safe, and I'm sure there's a huge market for that, as the elderly population grows. Obviously, we don't know if there's going to be another virus or another war, that might cull a lot of people off. We don't know this. So, we've got to just be mindful right now that there's a beginning and an ending. And one of the best things that can happen, again, it's interesting I'm talking about this with the South Node still in Scorpio as we're coming towards the end of that now, is, go see, and go help, elderly people. I think it's one of the most beautiful things you could do, especially at Christmas time, is rather than stay at home, there's something to be said for spending time with family, even though it can be stressful. But wouldn't it just be wonderful if you like went out and helped some homeless people that day? You know, there's loads of people that feed, you know, homeless people, or go to an elderly hair home without expectation. That's the thing. You know, a lot of people go to those places and they see the grandparents who are not quite with it. They might have Alzheimer's, dementia. There might be a lot, because it is a lot, and it really is a difficult thing to deal with, especially when you've idolised those people so much. But, you know, you could go help in the kitchen, you know, you could go help. So how can I help you? You know, how can we help this reality of what has now been put in a box, hidden away, you know, not to be dealt with? And it's not like that in the ancient cultures, the indigenous cultures. Those wise elders, you know, are seen as wise with a lot to offer. And they're not given the burden of this modern world because they can't do it. You know, they've got to be sedate. They've got to be relaxed. And I think the main thing I'm trying to say here with all of this is that we need to remember gratitude. We need to really remember how lucky we have it. And at the same time, there is a beginning and an end to everything. And time is short. You know, you see a lot of people who, for example, haven't had children because there's a timeline to everything. I'm not saying it's right to have children for everyone at all, but there is a problem going on. Especially, we've been looking a lot at this, me and Eugenie, recently, about this testosterone estrogen thing, that it seems to be a problem right now. Aquarius is a very homogenous sort of energy, you know, and as we're moving into this Aquarius age, the balancing of the male and female could easily become a lot more one. But biologically, you know, you could say there is a difference. And again, that could be demonized with a lot of the trans, or, you know, again, this evolution of how to exist within society, especially with technology. So it's very complicated right now. You know, it's a complicated time. And sometimes when things are like that, and we're trying to honour the changes, and we're trying to become harmonious with the differences, it can create extreme reactions. You know, it can create and we're seeing a lot of that with this potential of 2024, the election in America. And now, you know, just to bring this to the astrology, you know, Pluto has ingressed into Capricorn now. So we are back into the energy of 2008. And you look at the world and you can see, you know, there's still offences and, you know, war in Ukraine. The crypto market has really, you know, the SEC now has really revealed its hand in America. Again, lending very much to the idea of the East, you know, taking the advantage of that right now. And it is obviously to do with the dollar. Apparently people in Taiwan, Americans now, being taken out of Taiwan. So it's heating up, you know, and we're in Pluto in Capricorn now. So with Mercury also into Gemini, there's a potential for the reality to become kind of seen in this particular moment. And we've still got the nose to shift next month. So we're really in a crucial time span now of how the earth will tremor and fold. You know, it's funny, I saw this bridge in Philadelphia that was on the news that's just fallen down, and those arteries, you know, like how travel and things like that can occur, could be so disrupted. I remember there was an earthquake, so there was a volcano that happened 20 years ago now, and it was in Sweden. And when that went off, and how that just completely disrupted air travel, you know, all around Europe from a natural disaster. Even where we live here, you know, there's been a road that has been compromised because of the water. There's been so much snow this year, and the flooding or whatever, and then that kind of just destroyed, or a sinkhole, whatever, in a road. And then suddenly, the whole area of our travel, especially in the summer when it's really beautiful here, has been compromised. And these sorts of unseen unknowns can easily happen at times like this, because Pluto is now back into cardinal Earth. Earth being structure, the ground. Obviously, we've got Uranus in Taurus, you know, affecting the ground. And, you know, Pluto's back into Capricorn now. So, you know, obviously the energy of the fixed signs has changed a little bit. And obviously Venus now is in Leo too. So it's almost like the emergence has occurred, the new energy or the new technology, like AI was obviously the big one, you know, and now the Earth becomes a bit more seen again, you know, and how is that going to play out, you know, and that's the unknown. But with this Venus coming into its retrograde, which again next month, we'll talk about that. There are a lot of retrograde things about to happen now. Saturn's going to go retrograde. So Saturn into Pisces, moved off that square, that square to, right, let's go back. From the winter solstice of 2020, Saturn and Jupiter are now doing a different kind of dance, if you see what I mean. We're out of the emergence of it into, the, let's say, the waxing phase of it. So the proliferation, again, of this technology, you know, of this new world, you know, the 20-year cycle of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Don't forget, it's also a much bigger cycle. It's the air elements now, going all the way, actually, to the next 800 years. So we were completely shifted. That's why people call this the age of Aquarius. And with Pluto going in there as well, which we've just seen that, we've had, like I say, a massive glimpse of it all, even Saturn into Pisces. But now Saturn's going retrograde, Pluto's retrograde, gone back into Capricorn. That's just happened. And then, you know, Mercury is very fast at the moment, and it's squaring Saturn, for example, on the 15th. So it's very much like, what is this new normal now? You know, the new moon in Gemini happening on the 18th as well. The sun squaring Neptune, all of this sort of stuff that's happening is a bit like, what is this new normal look like now, really? It's just the best way to describe it, okay? Because it's never going to go back to how it was. That's just the reality of it. We are, in some ways, having a bit of respite from what's been a very intense start to the year, and look how fast this year has gone. So what do we do at times like this? Well, we pray that we've made the necessary adjustments and the right action to get us to where we need to be during what could be quite a interesting summer. And again, as the month plays out, we'll get more signs of that. You can see that someone like, for example, Trump's very much in the headlines now. You know, there's a lot of ways and means to remove him from the potential of going for office. We can see that there's tension globally still in the world. Boris Johnson, bizarrely enough, has just gone he's resigned. Why is that? You know, are chickens coming home to roost? You know, there has been some bad decisions that were made, and you know, there's a lot of people who are, I don't know, less convinced about maybe some of the decisions made during COVID, and you know, what was it all about? There's been some interesting and illuminating disclosure, you know, about some of the stuff that's been going on with that. There's another side of people who are thinking the governments are being irresponsible, you know, as well. So there's a fractiousness, there's a divisiveness going on. For example, millennials who might have jumped into crypto, you know, are getting hammered right now, you know, and the world is definitely, or America certainly, is definitely against that currency, you know. Is it because they've got Fed now waiting to go, which is a CBD system? Are the global elites all in cahoots about creating this, you could say, one world currency or CBDC system, which many people many people don't want that. You know, there's a lot of people who want decentralized currencies, and they're trying to destroy that. There's no doubt about it. America is certainly right now. So how's that going to play out? You know, you've got a young group of people who could be very pissed off. You know, how's that going to happen this summer? You've got people who are obviously into certain cults, which is a big feature as well. You know, let's bring people like Donald Trump, Andrew Tate, you know, all these various people. And they're not buying into what's happening in the media as much, you know, and they're also against their idols, let's say, you know, being misrepresented. And those idols, those cult figures, are just still clearly on a path for whatever it may be. You know, whether it's attention, whether it's the truth, whether it's, you know, just self-serving interest. It's hard to discern. So it's a crazy time, and you've got a lot of young people who might be angered, irritated. You've got a lot of gender stuff going on as well, which is bringing in certain rights and reactions. And then you've got this war energy also. So this is the time to just sum it all up for you. If you're listening to this right now, you know, whatever it is that you're here to do, is it art? Is it fashion? Is it, you know, is it health? Is it healing? Is it, I don't know, consciousness? Is whatever it may be, you know, whatever it may be, you know, now this summer really is the time to do it, you know, to be seen, to show the way, to be the light. And it doesn't have to be setting up a business, getting a website, even though that would be a good idea, but you don't have to do that. You don't have to get a YouTube channel. You don't have to do all these things. I mean, we're doing that, but you don't have to do that. You could just literally go knock on your neighbour's door, you know, and if you've never spoken to them, introduce yourself. You know, you could even go look in the directory, whatever, and say, okay, you know, I'd like to help an old people's home, or I'd like to go to a homeless shelter and start giving food, or go work on a farm. You could do all those things, because all those things are going to be helpful, you know, of service, and it's going to help at times of crisis if that's what's coming. It's going to help in times of unrest and unease if that's what's coming. Because we still got a few. Every week is going to be quite thrilling, you know. Like I look forward to hearing from you and us communicating, and you'll see over this summer how like all the stuff that we're doing will get more seen as well. But it's going to be a thrilling summer, simply because as we move to these eclipses, which will be happening in October, and then we move next year when we get to the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Obviously, we've got the node shifting next month, which is huge. And then we've got all the things to play out next year, you know, when Pluto goes back into Aquarius. And then we're really moving then towards this Saturn-Neptune conjunction and various other things, you know, retrograde stuff as well. We're moving towards that 2026 timeline. We're moving towards Uranus going into Gemini, you know, 2027 timeline. We've got a lot to play out in these next 3 years. And again, that's massively why I'm doing this, because things, you know, obviously I could have been doing this for years now, you know, and there's a part of me that doesn't want to be doing this, as I said this many times before. But if you're not in it, if you're not showing who you are, if you're not doing your art right now, if you're not doing you, and it doesn't have to be, like, say, online, it could just be on a community level. But if you're not doing it, when crisis comes, you know, you're not relevant, you're not seen, you haven't built up your alliances, and it's very, very important that right now, you know, people are calling out certain behaviour. Like, for example, with the SEC and everything that's doing in crypto right now, you know, it's pretty obvious that there's so many people who would be into decentralised finance, and there's so many people who'd be like, especially the millennials, calling out, you know, like, why wouldn't America want to be on the leading edge of this? And then when you look at the obvious, which is so hard, sadly, for a lot of people who haven't gone through the dark night of the soul, and this is why we're here to help, by the way, to get everybody into their authenticity, okay? And all of you people listening right now, you could do the same. You can you can help others, okay, get into their authenticity. Because the problem is that the cognitive dissonance has been a feature of the last 3 years. You know, the willful ignorance, the apathy, and the denial, and all of that has created a certain degree of disempowerment, checking out. It's also created a certain degree of there's no point talking, you know, whatever, you know, and there's something to be said for that. That's why so many people don't want to watch the news now, for example. But then when crisis comes, you know, there's not enough of us, you know, to really kind of like make people accountable. And that's the danger. There's always the faith. That's why, you know, again, faith is so important. That's why hope is a beautiful thing. You know, not false hope, but genuine belief, you know, in how we can correct our negative polarity, go from negative to positive. I wake up in the morning, I'm feeling like shit, I'm feeling so depressed, I'm feeling so upset, Everyone's been feeling it because of this horrible time we've just been through, or this changing time, which is inevitable. We can't do anything about it. It's going to happen. We're going to move into this type 1 civilization the next 100 years. There's no getting out of it. Space travel, all these sorts of things. Everything will be very different in 100 years. This will seem trite to then. But what is important, why it is relevant, why we're here right now, and why I'm doing this for everyone, is because what we do now will affect the outcome. And that's where the quantum physics comes in. It's not linear, i.e. in the way that, let's say, for example, if there is an agenda, if you want to go into this sort of way of thinking, if it is all part of a setup, to get us all enslaved, or whatever extreme you want to look at it, then it's arrogant to presume this is the folly. Let's say, for example, like the dinosaurs who probably ruled the planet if they did even exist, because there's theories that say that didn't even happen. But we took a meteorite, or let's say, or bacteria, whatever it may be, something that was unseen, unpredicted. No way they could have predicted that. These dinosaurs potentially, I can't say that for sure, and then suddenly they were eradicated. They were removed. And it's the same thing now. Like you look at these banking systems, which obviously don't want decentralized finance. You look at these globalists who obviously want to rule the world. Because they've always ruled the world. With these, royal families and things like that. And there's a lot of people also who do genuinely believe that there's overpopulation and want less people on the planet. I mean, these are just things that exist in our reality, okay? And a lot of people agree with it. A lot of people think, how are we going to have these resources? It goes back to Malthus. If you study Thomas Malthus, it's the same stories playing out again. Same thing happened in the Industrial Revolution. Thomas Malthus was like, no, we're not going to be able to feed the population. This is a problem. This is why the bubonic plague happened, and this is going to happen again, and we're going to have famines and all these sorts of things to cull the population, Now, sadly, if you're not learned or you don't learn these things, you don't know what repeats in history, what's been said before. Many people, if you think about the environmentalists, and there's something to be said for it, whether it's true or not, again, this is the problem of our time right now. This is the problem of this confusion, and this is the Neptune and Pisces thing. And that's going to change in 2026. It's like the reckoning is coming, and it's coming with a vengeance, because Saturn will conjunct Neptune in 2026, 0 degrees Aries. So anything that is not in alignment with the future, with what is new, what is in integrity is what I believe. This fire energy is going to go woof. And it's going to just take out all the bullshit, all this Neptunian, dreamy, like imaginative and all this sort of stuff, which, to be fair, that's why I'm saying this now. Now is the time to use the consciousness, the imaginal, the potential, especially with Saturn and Pisces now. Now is the time to use that. That's why I'm saying this is the time of the artist. What Einstein talked about, this is a scientist, he talked about the imaginal. All of those people understood the nature of the infinite, the unknown, the hidden realm, God, those sorts of things. They weren't in ignorance about that. They weren't in willful denial about that. They weren't in apathy about that. They knew always that there was a superior energy, whatever you want to call it, the will to power, if you want to look at it in that way, that would serve. And if you could tap into that, despite all your difficulties, you would find a way and you would find meaning. It's what Viktor Frankl talks about as well, Man's Search for Meaning. There is always a way. Abundance is our birthright. So the key is right now is to act with sovereignty, act in the way, be the way, show the way, and also take action. That is so much of a part of it. So if you go to, let's say, an unplugged night and just do a poem, you don't know how that's going to affect the world. You just don't know. It's the butterfly effect, right? You could put it on a YouTube channel if you felt compelled to do that or brave enough to do that. I've got no choice, basically. I have to do it, because if I don't do it, then I'm not doing my service, and people can delete it, reject it, discern it as much as they want. That's fine. But if I don't do it, I'm just like not doing what I need to do. That's how I feel personally. And if you feel the same, then you've got to do it. You've got to set things up now, before this Saturn Neptune conjunction in Aries. And wow, the new then, how things look will be fixed. And it's cardinal fire, but it's just unyielding is cardinal energy. There's no escaping it, There's no point predicting the unknown. I'm not a scientist in, let's say, I don't know, Los Alamos or whatever. I can't say there's going to be an earth flare or, whatever, these sorts of things. I don't know if that's going to happen. And there's no point living your life like that. But you do have to be ready, because I've seen it now. I saw it in 2020. I saw when these conjunctions happened. I was following the astrology for like 10 years before that. Seeing it play out literally was bizarre, Again, is that phenomenological? Am I creating it? But everybody experienced it collectively. So there's something in it. Now, the fact that I've come to this quite innocently, maybe I can talk innocently. Maybe that helps, because I don't know everything. All I'm trying to say right now is it's up to us to create the change. It really, really is. We can change the outcome. We can create something that is unseen. And that's what always happens. That's the beauty of, let's say, divine intervention. And there's a lot of that energy now with Neptune in Pisces and Saturn in Pisces. There is the potential for that. Everything's going down this path, and then out of nowhere, it rapidly changed for the better. That could happen. But if we don't do something about it, then we haven't really been sovereign. We haven't been of service. We haven't done what was required at the time of need, or the time of peace, when we could do something about it. So I really, really encourage you all now with Pluto in Capricorn, because we're in there now, the Earth, how it looks, and again, God willing, you've all taken action and put yourself in positions now where you feel safe, or you're in positions where you can survive or thrive during this time, because that's what that was always about. Enjoy the summer if you're in the summer. Even if you're in the winter, it's not all bad. Like, I had fun skiing this year, for example. It wasn't all bad. So just enjoy it, because Mercury's in Gemini and there's a lot of playful energy right now. And Saturn going retrograde is really going to be very special or hark to what I've just been talking about. If we have a dream, if we are an artist, we are a philosopher, or whatever it is that you are, then now's the time to really reflect on that. It's when we get to the eclipses that things are going to get more intense again. But we've got to see how this summer plays out. It's going to be very important how this summer plays out, which will again prepare people for 2026. Are you going to start considering leaving your country next year? People are scared about certain elections coming, and the certain things. If you can't leave your country, have you got the community, for example, that's going to serve you? Have you got food? Have you got water supply? Because these are all things that can be quite important in times of war. Have we prepared, for more inflation, deflation? Are we prepared, to, let's say, if you put a lot of money into altcoins, you haven't got enough Bitcoin, let's say, even though none of it is potentially safe. Have you done that, or are you going to now reallocate, even if you're going to take tax losses, for example, knowing that what you've got is going to do really well in 2 or 3 years? Some could say this is a great buying opportunity, but again, without regulation, it is a very risky place to be. Are you buying gold? Are you aware of crude oil? Are you doing these sorts of things? Are you buying a house right now when interest rates are high, or are you planning for that? Are you going to start thinking about 2008? What happened during that period of time? Are you planning for that? Have you got a bit of money on the side to buy the dip if necessary? These are all the things that are going to help us thrive, and not just that, be in community, see each other, have a lot of fun. All of these things are going to be really helpful when we get on the other side of this, when we get to 2028 and 2032, because that's when we're really on the other side of all of this. These next 3 years are crucial. Okay. So I think that's all I'm going to say. Again, this month in some ways is a better month than some of the other months that we've had so far, because it's been a lot. That Uranus Saturn square the last couple of years has just been really full on. You know, obviously all the main stuff. If you look at astrology, you know, Pluto conjuncting Jupiter, Pluto conjuncting Saturn, Pluto, you know, and all those three planets. That's what 2020 actually was all about. You know, it was really, really intense. And now we're coming to squares and oppositions, or, well, squares of some of those planets. So the faster moving planets are doing a lot right now, but it's those bigger themes and how they play out, you know, is how we can use this next 20 years, you know, this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, the great cycle they call it, and how we can work out how we're moving into, let's say, this air element over the next 800 years. It's moving into that. It's not Earth, even though this Pluto in Capricorn right now will make us really feel the Earth. It'll make us really see the Earth with AI now, with automation coming in, with this technology coming in. Drones, obviously, look how much that's been talked about this year compared to other years. So hang in there, be calm. Don't be in ignorance, though. That's not going to help, you know. Don't be in apathy. Don't be in denial, you know. Take small steps. Be thoughtful at times like this. Have a plan B. Let's see how it unfolds. But most importantly, get your vitamin D for in the summer, you know, and try be around people. Get over this stigma or this conditioning and this trauma that's occurred during COVID. You know, it's so important to have community. It really, really is. And that is also a description of Aquarius. So even if it's online, you know, there's got to be a community. And for me, face-to-face is very important. Okay, well, that's all I'm going to say right now. There's no questions here. Just be wise, be thoughtful, and remember, this is a great time to thrive as well. So we're very close to the node shifting. We'll be moving into the new phase of Aries and Libra, and there is an opportunity to launch. You know, we've gone through the main propulsion of that launch. Now it's time to gather the information, redirect if necessary, and get really focused on, you know, the moon, you know, focus on where the reward will come. And again, Jupiter-Uranus next year is going to be a big deal for that. If you've got $100, you know what I mean, and you know, and you could afford to lose it, you know, it might not be such a bad idea putting a bit of speculation in certain things right now, which might make huge gains. Just think about it. All right then. With that in mind, I'm going to say goodbye and take care and see you soon.